Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 239 of Exploring the Lord of the Rings, and we are ready to go for another evening. So good to be back with you guys. I know I've been a little intermittent lately because things have been really crazy with stuff. Rings and Realms has been so much fun to film and to do during the Rings of Power season, but it's kind of a lot of work. I was in the studio for like 10 hours yesterday filming that. Working on it, developing it, and filming it. So yeah. I'm glad you guys are enjoying Rings and Realms. Actually, I had a thing I wanted to make sure to tell you guys about. And I know this is going to be a terrible tease to many of you who are geographically remote from New England, but should you happen to be able to be or to get yourself into the area, next week, of course, not this week, but next week is the finale episode of Season 1 of The Rings of Power. So we're doing a special thing, because as it happened, by chance, we were already planning to have New England Moot. New England Moot is happening on the Saturday the 15th, and we're holding it at the studio where we film Rings and Realms. We've been planning to do that for months, long before they announced the schedule. Then, of course, they announced the schedule, and we find that the finale of Rings and Realms is it is the finale of Rings and Realms, but we found that the finale of the Rings of Power Season 1 is scheduled for that very week, so that, in fact, the finale episode is going to be airing 36 hours before we're going to be in New England Moot in the studio. So, what we're planning to do, we're doing a separate special event. So New England Moot is still happening on Saturday the 15th. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be at the studio, and it's going to be awesome. Love New England Moot. Love the folks who come out for New England Moot. But we're going to do this other thing as well. So on the Friday the 14th of October, we're going to do a special finale event for Rings and Realms. So we're going to be at the studio. So the studio that we've been working with, our marvelous studio, is Studio Lab in Derry, New Hampshire. So at Studio Lab in Derry, New Hampshire, on Friday the 14th, we're going to do a live studio audience recording of the finale episode of Rings and Realms. So folks who come to this other event can be involved from beginning to end. Absolutely the beginning, meaning we're going to do a live watch party on the Thursday night, late Thursday night, when the episode drops. And then we're going to do, so we'll watch it together. We'll do a live discussion afterwards. And then on Friday, we'll start planning and setting up the episode so you guys can all be backstage there at the studio. Indeed, it's going to be more than just a backstage pass or a studio audience seat. You'll be able to be involved in discussions and brainstorming as we, of course, have to figure out what to say in the episode, 12 hours after the episode has aired for the first time, right? That's kind of how we roll in doing this thing. And so then we're going to be filming then that day. Maggie's going to be in town, so Maggie's going to be there for this event too, so she and I will both be present for the final episode. So we're going to film Maggie's segments and my segments, and we're going to do a whole bunch of really fun extra stuff. I mean, if you guys have been watching Rings and Realms, you know that we kind of have fun doing extra little things. We're kind of adding on extra things every week, so we might have we might film scenes with extras. Who knows? We're going to be doing some live Q&A. So anyhow, this is going to all be stuff that's going on. You like the under the table thing, Emily? That was funny. I had fun with that. So anyway, so we're gonna do all this. So we're gonna be in the studio together all day. Of course, also Maggie and I have our Twitter thing where we're doing our Twitter after reaction show, where hopefully we're hopefully we'll be able to arrange to get a cast guest for that. So you guys can be backstage for that and another broadcast that I'm doing on Twitch. And again, it's just like all day you guys can kind of be hanging out with us at the studio, taking part in the process and watching the filming. It is super cool, all of this stuff. So it's going to be really great to, kind of have everybody around as sort of part of the team that day. Tickets are really limited for this because it's not a huge room. I mean, it's a pretty big room, but it's not a massive room. So we can't seat hundreds of people. So there's sort of limited seats, but hope that folks can come. There's a discounted price for people who are also coming to New England Moot the next day. So anyway, that's all happening next week. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew about that because it's going to be a really fun opportunity. And as I say, I know it's a bit of a tease to folks who are far away because it's hard to get yourself physically to New Hampshire, and there's not going to be a hybrid version of this one. There is for New England Moot, so you can attend New England Moot and the things that are going to be happening there. But there's not going to really be an opportunity for hybrid stuff. It's going to be too ad hoc and sort of pell-mell during the day. So anyway, that's what's going on. So someone was asking, am I still going to be doing the Twitch broadcast on Thursday night when the episode drops? Mostly. It won't be the same because I won't be here home, sitting in front of my computer watching with you guys. I'll be at the studio and we'll be watching live. I'll still do the watch party so that we can still have the chat together while we're going. That'll be up and running while, and some of the people in the live audience will probably be participating in the chat as well. And then I'll be doing a Q&A mostly discussion mostly with the people in the room. I think afterwards I may try to check questions from the chat room as well as I go. That might be a little bit harder under the circumstances, but at the very least we'll broadcast that live. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so questions about. So are we going to have Rings and Realms episodes between seasons? Probably something like that. We're kind of working that out. We're not really sure. Though I think for Thoughtless, I saw you saying we should have DVD extras. Actually, kind of planning some of that. So there are several things. There's several things that we've really wanted to do or wanted to film that we've not had a chance to do because there's not time. I mean, it's so frantic. I mean, we had. The last 2 weeks, we've had somebody, we've been filming on Monday, finishing up by, last week we finished up by 9-10 o'clock. This week we finished up at 1 a.m. And, who then just stayed and edited all night, basically to push it out on Tuesday. So there's a lot of work goes into this. And of course, all of it is volunteer. We're all volunteering our time. So everybody else has other stuff, going on in between and everything. So there's been a bunch of ideas that we have of segments that we want to do, extra bonus segments that we want to do that we just have wished to do. I even had one all scripted out for this week, but we couldn't get it wasn't the shooting time, it was the editing time that we didn't have time for. So those we're probably going to do up in between seasons and release those as extras. So I definitely think that's gonna happen for sure. So there will certainly be some things that will be released in between, but we're taking that one step at a time. I'm going to get through these next 2 weeks, and then there's more stuff going on for the rest of October, and then I have some sleep scheduled for November, and that'll be good. But the Other Minds and Hands is definitely going to be continuing as we go through. So yeah, lots of stuff that's gonna be happening. So we'll see. Lots of plans are in flux, and we're gonna see what we could do. There's a whole bunch more that we could do. We are still using only a fraction of the capabilities of that studio. The problem is, it's a fully 3D environment that we can do. Like, we could actually film me in the midst of Numenor. I could be interacting with digital objects, on screen. Like, there's a lot of things that we could be doing in the context of, which would be really fun for sort of explaining and discussing and talking about things. But we're trying to get access to some of the 3D assets from the show, which is what we would need. So anyway, lots of stuff that we're kind of working on and hoping to make some progress with and everything. So, yeah. Yeah, for Thoughtless, it's true. The time when I was, like, my first couple years as an assistant professor were certainly some of the most sleep-deprived. I think they were the most sleep-deprived years of my life, not least because I also had a 1-year-old at the time. But anyway, they were very sleep-deprived days back then. But things have been tolerably busy. Anyhow, awesome. Yeah, Dora Struck, thanks for posting that. Yes, that's the Studio Lab website. It's pretty fun. Anyhow, yes. So as I say, I just want to let you guys know that was happening. Lots of fun things coming up. Don't forget about Middlemoot this weekend, right? So I'm going to be in Kansas City this weekend for Middlemoot. Can't wait to get back to Kansas City. Haven't been there for 4 years, so I'm looking forward to getting back to Kansas City this weekend, and then next week is the New England stuff up at the studio and the finale episode, and that's going to be great. Dora Story, I've always wanted to go to a Royals game in Kansas City. I've never gotten the chance yet. Don't think I'm going to get a chance this weekend either. But I do console myself with barbecue when I go out there, as I've kind of decided that Kansas City barbecue is really my favorite in the whole country. So anyway. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, that's where, I know it's a bold statement, Ron, but I spent the first year we did regional moots. I spent, I did some research. I did some investigations as I was traveling around the country for the regional moots, and I have to say, hard to beat Kansas City. Yeah, I know, but yeah, Evil Dr. Cannon and probably other Texans are not real happy with that statement, but I love Texas barbecue, really do. I have a tradition whenever I go to Texas, the first place I go from the airport is a barbecue place, right? If I can possibly manage it. But anyway, yeah. Anyhow, Middlemoot is going to be great fun this weekend. And for folks who can't make it to Kansas City or who can't make it to New England the next weekend for the next moot, those are going to be broadcast as well, so that you can attend those remotely if you would like. But all right, let's dig back into the text. So. Remember that we just had Aragorn and Sam seeing the birds flying overhead. So we got the description of the birds flying overhead last time. And then he jumped up, right? Strider then leaps up and goes straight over to Gandalf. And so here we have the exchange between the two of them, which I've been looking forward to. All right. Regiments of black Regiments of black crows are flying over all the land between the mountains and the Grey Flood, he said, and they have passed over Holland. They are not natives here. They are Crabine out of Fangorn in Dunland. I do not know what they are about. Possibly there is some trouble away south from which they are fleeing, but I think that they are spying out the land. I have also glimpsed many hawks flying high up in the sky. I think we ought to move again this evening. Holland is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched. And in that case, so is the Redhorn Gate, said Gandalf. And how we can get over that without being seen, I cannot imagine. But we will think of that when we must. As for moving as soon as it is dark, I am afraid that you are right. Luckily our fire made little smoke, and had burned low before the Crabine came, said Aragorn. It must be put out, and not lit again. All right. Okay, so There is much that is not said in these paragraphs. And here is where one of these places where I want to be really careful, right? What exactly is happening here, right? Regiments of black crows are flying over all the land between the mountains and the gray flood. And by the way, if we glance ahead at our map again, which I am like never planning to take down from my slideshow here, the gray flood, also called the Gwathlo, right? So you've got the Bruinen and the Horwell, right? The Loudwater and the Horwell, which combine here to make the Grey Flood, right? And that goes all the way down to the ocean by Londdire, which was the landing of the Númenóreans. But where they are in Holland, that's really quite a distance, right? Aragorn is claiming that these crows that they saw are flying, searching over all the land between the mountains and the Grey Flood. That's a long space, right? That is a huge area that is being covered, carpeted by these crows, right? So that's one really interesting point. Notice, by the way, of course, Sam has no idea about this region, right? He's never been here before. This is way beyond the limit of his geography, right? So what he sees the crows doing does not convey much to his mind, apart from the fact that the crows are creepy, intimidating, and not acting normally, right? This is deeply unnatural crow behavior, and we've been getting the scene, as we have discussed, mostly from Sam's perspective so far, right? Strider, watching the same performance that Sam saw, has much more data than Sam had, right? And the first thing that he mentions is not where the crows come from, but where they're searching, right? They are flying over all the land between the mountains and the Grey Flood. A systematic search is being performed through this whole region, and they have passed over Holland. I'm not sure whether that means, and they've been here, or whether this means, but we're okay now, right? Probably both to some extent. Like, they have passed over Holland in the sense like they're gone now, right? Or is it simply like, and this was included in their search? When I look at this, though, there are a couple things here. So yes, I believe he has deduced the pattern of the search from his observation. Yes, Bjorning, that's just what I think. I think that he knows the land, and he has good eyes, right? And he's able to see, before they duck down under the bushes even, he was able to see the patterns of their flights. And so I think that he is, and obviously I think there's some estimating going on here, right? That there's some, perhaps a little bit of guesswork on his part, but based on how far their sweeps seem to be taking them from where he could see. And remember, they've been seeing, in the place where they are in Holland, they're clearly relatively high up, right? I mean, we've seen vistas described. I mean, think about how far away they're seeing the crows coming. So it's not like they're behind hills and stuff like that, right? So clearly he can see far enough that he's able to estimate. Yeah, I think their sweeps are going all the way to the Grey Flood, right? I too, Bjorning, imagine that Aragorn knows the map very well and has a keen sense of direction and distance. Absolutely. So yeah, Josh, I do think that he does have a limited vantage point. I mean, he's not like at a high watch point necessarily. But remember that when he left the camp, which is in that sort of dell enclosed by holly trees, it seems. He did go out and up, right? So there was some kind of a vantage point. So again, I don't think he's in the bottom of a valley. I don't think he's obstructed by hills. I think he's able to get somewhere where he can see a far enough distance. And of course, the crows are not always flying that low, right? So I think he's able to see, or again, at least estimate that it looks like this is not just, they didn't just pass over here, which is why I think, I'm now suspecting all of a sudden that I've been misreading this sentence my whole life. That is, I've always read this as a statement of alarm, right? I'm not sure it is. I mean, mild alarm, perhaps, but not urgency. There's good news, I think, to be gleaned from Aragorn's report here, right? If regiments of black crows are flying over all the land between the mountains and the Grey Flood, again, I always had the vague sort of assumption in my head, I think, because I never really sat down and thought through this paragraph before. But exactly, Chris, that's exactly it. The good news is they didn't come here directly and are searching a wide area. Yeah, exactly. Basically, a conclusion you can take from this sentence is whoever is searching for us has no idea where we actually are, right? I mean, they are searching hundreds of square miles. So really what the regiments of crows are doing is attempting to rule out that they're in this whole quadrant of Eriador, right? It's not exactly a quadrant, but this whole section of Eriador, right? Which is really pretty broad. And again, if we, it's especially that last bit, and they have passed over Holland, that seems a little bit sort of uncertain to me. And that is, again, I don't think, I always took that to be alarming, but I don't think it is. I don't think it is alarming, right? They're searching this whole area. They're gone now, right? They've passed over here. This was included in their search because it's between the mountains and the Grey Flood, but they've not singled it out, right? So I don't think he's saying we've been spotted, we have to run, right? Nor, I think, is he saying, like, we've been betrayed, they know where we are, right? Or like they must have found some, they're going to like pick up our trail at any time or something like that. I think the purport of his message here is simply Holland is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched. That is, we are in danger here. We now have very good evidence that the enemy is watching this area. We just saw it happen, right? There's no other explanation for that thing, right? For what just happened there. There's no other explanation than that this whole area is being hunted through, and they may come back, right? They might do another sweep. They might try to search a different way, right? The enemy is vigilant, and the vigilance of the enemy is turned towards this area. We've not been spotted yet, right? So far, so good, but we have to be careful, right? And this is why, the response is not like, run, right? The response by Gandalf is, yeah, we better not. They were planning a leisurely day off, right? They were going to spend an entire 36 hours of rest here in this dell, this sheltered dell that they found in Holland, which has a wholesome feel to it. Holland does, right? And so they were hoping to find, physical and perhaps even spiritual rest in this place. But Aragorn is saying, yeah, we should not just hang out for 36 hours, right? We should keep moving because we know that the enemy is moving, right? Can we conclude that Aragorn has better eyesight than a hawk? I don't think so. Just because he can spot a hawk from the ground doesn't necessarily mean that he can see the hawk in as much detail as the hawk could see him from that height, right? But yeah. Right. So, okay. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing. His second sentence. They are not natives here. They are Crabine out of Fangorn and Dunland. He gives this statement very neutrally. He doesn't do any interpretation of it, right? He never hints at what this means. I can think of 3 reasons why he doesn't say anything further than these are Crabine out of Fangorn and Dunland. That is, okay, let me be explicit, even if Strider is not. What he hasn't said is, these are spies that work for Saruman. He has not said that, right? I can think of 3 reasons why he wouldn't say that. One reason is he thinks it's so obvious it doesn't need to be said. A second reason is that he is not wanting to leap to conclusions, right? He's stating the facts and just the facts, right? And then, leaving it to Gandalf's analysis or to further data, to specify the conclusion. Wait, I had a third one. Oh yeah, and the third reason I can think of that why he wouldn't say more is that he doesn't need to say more to Gandalf and doesn't want to say more necessarily in front of the rest of the party. That is that he's sort of being discreet here. And Jackie, exactly. The fact that we know, well, we may remember ahead that Aragorn and Gandalf are going to be having some whispered consultations out of other people's hearing is, I think, some evidence. Well, it's not evidence to support it, but it's indirect anyway. Indirect evidence that suggests perhaps that kind of thing is just what's going on here. So I don't know. Certainly the presumptive response. I do think Boromir would understand the reference as well. So the question is, why, right? Why would he be shy? And again, we know there's some level of shyness and discretion going on, right? We know that Gandalf and Aragorn are not going to talk about this stuff publicly. Why is that? I don't know. Well, let's wait until we see that conversation before we draw too many conclusions about that. All I will say at this point is, because what I think we can say based on what we've seen, is that I think that we've seen Gandalf in particular taking special pains to keep the hobbits' spirits up in particular, right? Many of Gandalf's comments have been directed at the hobbits or explicitly stated for the benefit of the hobbits. And I think, therefore, for Frodo's benefit in particular. Merry and Pippin are fine fellows after all, but I don't think it's their morale that Gandalf is primarily concerned with, right? Not that he doesn't care about them at all, but again, they're not his primary concern as leader of the party, right? So exactly, Amanmoto, it would suggest that Aragorn is sort of following Gandalf's lead here. Yeah. And agreed, morale is very important in a spiritual war. I mean, we've been looking at this from the beginning of this chapter. In some ways, I think it's been a sort of low-key recurring theme of the entirety of the Ringo South chapter has been people being mindful of Frodo's emotional and spiritual condition, right? Whether that was in Rivendell before they left or whether that was on the road, as we've seen, people understand that Frodo's outlook, Frodo's state of mind and the state of his heart are very relevant to the prospects for success of this trip. And I do suspect that Aragorn is being mindful of this as we go through. Okay, so I do think, though, it is also, I don't want to merely leap myself to the conclusion that he necessarily assumes that it's Saruman and that he just doesn't want to say that in front of people. That may well be true. But I also think Aragorn himself is also simply being cautious here, right? They can't know necessarily that this is Saruman, right? Not to mention the fact it is unclear. Gandalf, remember that this is one of the significant differences, very significant differences, between the Peter Jackson adaptation and the book. And that is that Saruman does not reveal the Palantir to Gandalf. Gandalf has no idea about the Palantir. I mean, he might possibly have some suspicions, but he does not know about the Palantir yet. And therefore, he does not know the extent to which Saruman is under the command, right? Under the influence of Sauron. He knows that Sauron is working. I mean, Saruman's recruitment speech, right, made it clear that he was working in active collusion with Sauron. Gandalf's own assessment that Saruman is still acting in rivalry and not yet in service to Sauron, which is at least partly true, right? But again, the line of thinking that we might possibly have, that is that Saruman might have sent out these Crabine, but he might have done so at the explicit instructions, right? Like, build me a murder of crows worthy of Mordor, or whatever, right? Like that might have happened. The genocide of crows might have been Sauron's idea, and quite a Sarumanic idea, I would say. Not necessarily a Sarumanic idea, but anyhow, so yeah, it would be very, we start immediately thinking that direction, knowing as we do, right, what Saruman's link to Sauron is. Can I just say that from my earliest days, I've disliked the fact that Sauron and Saruman's names are so similar, and when trying to talk about them both like this in single sentences, I find it even more frustrating. But anyway, yeah. So anyhow, just use Kuramo and Myron. Yeah, that would be simpler in one sense, I guess. But anyhow, okay. Yeah. Oh man, I'll never forget how I did find it confusing in some ways as a kid, but it was more than that. I just again, this kind of slip has been really annoying. But anyhow, okay, so we make that link, but I don't think that Gandalf would make that link. I certainly don't think that Aragorn would jump to that conclusion. That is, that the crows might be under Saruman's direction at Sauron's immediate command, right? Yeah. So anyhow, so Bjorning, I think that there are arguments to be made in either direction. That is, on the one hand, if you could see Aragorn's caution, right, in coming to this conclusion as something like really detached, and wonder would Aragorn be that detached? Is that how he would operate, in something like this? But again, I think I don't have a difficult time imagining him being cautious with this kind of thing, right? You don't want to leap to conclusions. But he knows where Crabine like this live, right? And there can't be too many of them left down there, I wouldn't think. Disciplined in his reasoning. Exactly. And yes, Jackie, you are right that he's not supposed to speculate here. he's giving his report, right? He is delivering the facts to the one who's in charge and who is supposed to be making decisions, right? And again, on top of that, knowing that he knows Gandalf well enough to know how little he's going to need to say for the two of them to be on the same page, right? So to some extent, his lack of analysis here, I think, has to do with the fact that little needs to be said. Neither one of them may necessarily just simply assume, oh, don't worry, this isn't Sauron, this is just Saruman, right? It's a good thing we don't have to worry, that whatever findings these crows come up with are going to get back to Sauron, right? It's a good thing we don't have to worry about that. Neither one of them is going to be thinking that. Both of them are too cautious for that. But both of them also know these things are coming from the greater Isengard neighborhood, right? Yeah. Let's see. Geiger was asking, in Unfinished Tales, wasn't Sauron already distrustful of Saruman at this point for lying to the Nazgul about the location of the Shire? Well, yeah, Sauron's always distrustful of people who claim to serve him, right? I mean, it's what it means to be a bad guy, right? To be a bad guy means to be truly loyal, truly and self-sacrificingly loyal to no one, and to trust that others are not going to be truly and self-sacrificingly loyal to you. If either of you were, you probably wouldn't be bad guys to begin with. The treacherous are ever distrustful, says Balancmond even more succinctly and aptly than I was saying. But and oft evil will shall evil mar. Yes, that many times is seen. Dolores Stroke agreed. Okay, so anyway, then his analysis. I do not know what they are about. Here's Aragorn being the most cautious I think he gets in this entire paragraph. I do not know what they are about. Possibly there is some trouble away south from which they are fleeing. But I think they are spying out the land. Okay, yeah, so there are two possibilities for what they're doing, right? One is that they're spying out the land. The other is that the appearance of spying out the land is just a coincidence, right? They're just, it's not exactly a migration, right? But they're just fleeing from trouble, like birds do. Something bad happened in the south, and they're just crabines seeking a new home, and over a really wide area, searching very meticulously for a new place to call home, right? After thousands of them were driven out by something, and they're just unusually coordinated, right, in their hunt. So yeah, it's not likely, though it is really probably the most plausible natural explanation, right? And I think that perhaps the very weakness of the theory is kind of telling here, right? And here is the place where I wonder most if Aragorn is not following Gandalf's lead in leaving things uncertain for the hobbits, right? He does not come in and saying they're onto us, they're hunting for us at any moment, right? Thousands of crows could descend upon us. He's just so there are two possibilities. It might be a fluke, might be natural, right? But I think they're spying out the land, right? He doesn't actually pull the punch, right? I think it's likelier that they're spying out the land, but the very fact that he opens the possibility, right? Arden Cray and I agree. He says it reminds me of Frodo saying that the strange men in black cloaks asking for Baggins may have nothing to do with him or his business. Yeah, exactly. But he'd rather avoid them all the same. Yeah, no, that's a good parallel right there. Now Silk Westcott asks, is Tolkien the author wish for the first-time reader to be confused or uncertain of this as well? I think that even the first-time reader who is reading with care is going to have watched the description of how the crabine are acting and say, you think that if it comforts you, Aragorn, but Howsoever, afraid of trouble in the south they might be, crows don't act like that, right? And again, Aragorn's not really asking anybody to believe that, right? He's not like, doubling down and saying, this is totally what I think is happening, right? In fact, he says his opinion is that that's not what is happening. But he does offer a natural explanation, right? Like, you can think about this. You can think of, it is kind of a straw man argument in a way, I think. But I think there's also, it seems to me, a sense in which he's kind of, allowing the fearful an out, potentially. I'm not going to say it's impossible that they have nothing to do with us, right? Like Frodo saying, maybe those Black Riders aren't actually searching for us. But I don't think anybody's really convinced by it any more than they were by Frodo's statement. And then he adds, I've also glimpsed many hawks flying high up in the sky. I think we ought to move again this evening. Notice, by the way, the conclusion. I'll say it a different way. The affirmation implied by that last sentence. I have also glimpsed many hawks flying up in the sky. Conclusion. It was the right choice to travel by night. Had they been traveling by day, they would certainly have been visible to hawks flying high up in the sky, right? Now, he is not necessarily stating that he knows for a fact that the hawks that he's seen have been, are definitely of evil intent, right? The crows, it's kind of unarguable, right? I mean, that kind of behavior is just not explicable in normal crow behavior, right? Crows just don't do that sort of thing without explicit instructions. So he does not have that kind of a smoking gun with the hawks, right? Hawks do fly about high up in the sky, right? Minding their own business, right? That's what hawks do. That's how hawks hunt. So you can't prove that. That might be a coincidence. It might have nothing to do with them. I think the key word in this sentence, and the reason that Aragorn mentions it, is the word many. I have glimpsed many hawks flying high up in the sky. One or two hawks, whatever. I dismissed it. Hawks happen, right? But I think that his implication is that he has glimpsed enough hawks in the sky that he is suspicious, especially in conjunction with the massive swarm of crabine that's flying over. I don't think that if he is implying, as seems very likely, that the crabine have been sent by Saruman because of where they come from, if that is indeed his implication, then I think we cannot draw any similar conclusions. I think we should be cautious about drawing similar conclusions about the hawks, right? It is possible that the crabine and the hawks are working together. That seems rather unlikely to me, though. If you want to, for instance, it kind of seems to me that if you have bird spies at your disposal and you want to carefully search out a broad geographical range, myself, I would go with the many hawks over the genocide of crows every day of the week, right? The genocide of crows is a cumbersome way to search the whole land, right? Not only is it inefficient in terms of number of birds, right? But also look at this disturbance it made, right? I mean, no one's going to miss that. And everyone's going, look how far off they saw them coming, right? I mean, even if they hadn't been hidden, they could have hidden. Again, it happens really fast in the film to make it more dramatic, but you'll remember in the book, there's a long time passes before they get to them, right? Had they not been hidden, they probably could have hidden, right? So whereas a few discrete hawks, or even many discrete hawks flying up in the sky so high that you can barely see them, well, that's a much more efficient way to get it done, I would say. So yeah, there is a chance that the crows are a plan B. That is possible. But I also kind of think that, again, I would think that Aragorn, at least with the kind of caution that he's been showing in his report so far, would likely suggest, would likely remain open to the possibility there might be more than one set of interested parties spying out this area. And I think that is one of the things that is reflected in his use of the passive voice in the last sentence of the paragraph. It is being watched. Holland is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched. By whom, right? He has put that it is being watched in the passive voice, I think in part because he is not claiming that he knows for sure who exactly is watching it, right? Saruman, of course, is a likely candidate, but there might be more than him. Are the hawks sent by somebody else? Are the hawks do the hawks come from Sauron and the crows from Saruman? Or maybe unlikely the other way around, right? Or somebody else. I mean, people were talking about, we know that Radagast is friends with the eagles, or at least we know that Radagast is friends with the eagles. Maybe he's friends with hawks too, right? Maybe this is Radagast trying to figure out where they are so he can help. Who knows, right? But in any case, so, maybe they're not even all malicious, but one way or another, Holland is no longer wholesome for us. And of course, his use of the word wholesome, right, is very conspicuous because that was Gandalf's word, right? He's reversing Gandalf's earlier proclamation about Holland, right? That there's a wholesome air to Holland because the elves once lived there. And so now he's saying Holland is no longer wholesome for us in a totally different sense, right? It's not that Holland has been corrupted and that the air's bad now or whatever, but it's definitely any wholesomeness that we might have gained from Holland has expired, right? It's time for us to go. We shouldn't rest. But again, notice how he's not stepping on Gandalf's toes. Aragorn is being very circumspect here. He's not even making recommendations. You'll notice, right? He doesn't say, I think this is what we should do at any point. He's being cautious in drawing conclusions about the data that he has observed. He's very thorough in his data, right? He's gathered quite a bit of data. He presents that clearly and carefully. He is cautious about jumping to conclusions about it. He draws a conclusion about the situation. Holland is being watched and is therefore no longer wholesome for us. But he doesn't suggest anything. He doesn't even put forward an idea for what they should do or how they should change what they do, right? Aragorn plainly is respecting Gandalf's authority as the leader of this expedition. There is no question who is in charge and who is the decision maker in this company. Yeah, exactly, Bjorning, I agree. He all but says we must move on. Why doesn't he just say it? Because he's respecting Gandalf's. He's making his recommendation to Gandalf clear. He's making it pointedly clear in using the word wholesome, right? Gandalf suggested that they stay for 36 hours in that spot because of the wholesomeness of Holland, right? That it would do them good to rest, and best of all, to rest here, right? And so he's like, wholesomeness of Holland revoked, right? Just saying, right? The obvious recommendation from this is that we should not, in fact, stay an extra night here. And Gandalf, of course, immediately asserts that conclusion, right? In fact, notice what Gandalf says. I love this. As for moving as soon as it is dark, I am afraid you were right. I think we... No, I'm sorry. I'm skipping a sentence. Look, Gandalf does say, I think we ought to move again. Or Aragorn does say, I think we ought to move again this evening, right? So he does make a recommendation. Take it all back. Take it all back. See, I skipped a sentence. I jumped ahead because I was excited about the passive voice at the end of the sentence. He does say, I think we ought to move again this evening. So he does make a recommendation, right? He does make a recommendation. I know, right? See what happens when you skip sentences, Barry, dear? Oh, my goodness. Right, so he does make a recommendation, though he still is doing that very respectfully and cautiously, right? I think we ought to move again this evening. Holland is no longer wholesome for us. So he's backing it up with that state, with that reversal, right? Holland is no longer wholesome for us. That is, it is likely to be a net loss if we stay here, right? Yeah. And yeah, Drowsnake, you're right. Aragorn is going to be taking over as the leader of the Fellowship in a few days. That is really interesting to think about. It is a matter of days before Aragorn is going to be the leader of this party. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. And a few decades for us. Not quite decades, Drowsnake. Yes. Months. Probably months. Gandalf's response, and in that case, so is the Redhorn Gate. And how we can get over that without being seen, I cannot imagine. But we will think of that when we must. As for moving as soon as it is dark, I am afraid that you are right. Oh, man. Okay. Yes, I think we're definitely getting a preview of their disagreement here. Yeah, for sure. Gandalf is definitely saying a bunch of things without saying things here, right? Clearly, Gandalf is concerned about crossing over the Redhorn Gate. But Aragorn has argued in its favor, right? So Gandalf takes this opportunity to put something, to register this towards that argument, right? Remember what you said about being watched next time we debate about what path we should take, right? How we can get over the Redhorn Gate without being seen, I cannot imagine, right? If Holland is no longer wholesome for us, how exposed will we be on the Redhorn Pass, right? But we will think of that when we must. We'll think of that when we must. We don't have to talk about it right now. The decision, they've not reached the decision point on that. So Gandalf is just kind of, earmarking this page for further discussion later on. Jackie, it is kind of like Aragorn and Gandalf aren't going to argue. They're like mom and dad not arguing in front of the kids, right? Yeah. Oh, cool, Dan. Thanks. Dan was just checking in the Tale of Years. Gandalf's fall in Moria is almost exactly a week after this incident. Yeah, there we go. Yep. Right, but we will think of that when we must. As for moving on as soon as it is dark, I am afraid that you are right. He agrees with him. You can tell that Gandalf is reluctant. He thought that it was important for them to rest and to recover, but agrees that the balance, right, the net what they should do is really to move on as soon as it is dark. Luckily our fire made little smoke and it burned low before the Crabine came, said Aragorn. Again, notice his last remark, I think, like his first remark, returns to the idea, I don't think we were spotted, right? Luckily, we weren't spotted. We had a fire, right? That was, is there a little bit of, well, not rebuke, but sort of suggestion there, right? I mean, he's going to say it must be put out and not lit again, right? He's going to make a strong recommendation there. That's much stronger than I think we ought to move again this evening, right? It must be put out and not lit again, right? Gandalf, didn't you say something about listening to the recommendations of a ranger? If that ranger is Aragorn, well, here's my recommendation. No more fires, right? But we're fine, right? We're fine. We weren't spotted. We weren't spotted. They don't know where we are yet. There's no cause to panic after this incident. What they know, though, is that a search is happening. That's not new information. They knew the enemy was going to be searching, right? Now, Anatar's gift seat, what a great name that is. What is the real threat of the party being spotted, at least in the immediate future? Would the crows alert the orcs / Balrog and Moria? I'm not sure. I really am not. I think that it's possible. Possible, mind. As I suggested, Saruman, if Saruman is indeed behind the Crabine, which seems likely, if Saruman is behind the Crabine, they're kind of OP, right? I mean, this is a lot of spies to set out, right? To send out. I mean, it's like the difference between sending out scouts to explore the land and like a row of searchers marching across a field, searching every square foot, right? That's a pretty intense way to search a significant slice of continent, right? But that's what they seem to be doing. Has he sent so many to search here so that they could do something about them themselves, right? I mean, do the Crabine have orders to attack if they do find anything suspicious? They could do. I mean, there are enough of them. What would the company do if the Crabine did find them, right? And they were being attacked by 10,000 crows, right? How could you possibly not be killed by that many crows all attacking at once, right? You don't even have to have seen Hitchcock to be concerned about that. I don't know. It would truly be a murder of crows. And Drow Snake, genocide of crows might be an exaggeration, but do they have orders to kill any parties of humans that they, like humans or hobbits that they find in the wilderness in this area? It's possible. I mean, there are enough of them to do this. And there seem to me to be rather too many merely to scout, right? So I don't know. There are many places in almost all visual adaptations. Almost all visual adaptations play fast and loose with time and distances. Almost all of them do. Goodness knows the Rings of Power show does. It's okay. I'm good at suspending disbelief, so I just try not to think too much about the distances people are traveling and the times in which they're supposed to be doing that. I'm fine with it. But you have to do exactly the same thing with the Peter Jackson films. Gandalf's trip to Isengard from the very beginning. Right? It's not just the bunny sled in the Hobbit films. That gets the most... people always bring that one up, right? But it's just as bad in the Lord of the Rings films. Gandalf's trip to Isengard. Gandalf's trip to Minas Tirith and back, right? The Crabine, right? The Crabine, which fly over and apparently do see the company, even though they cunningly hide from them. And then they fly down to Isengard and are there in like 10 minutes, right? Apparently. Anyway, I mean, that's... that is... It's what they always do, right? Tolkien is not going to do that kind of thing, right? At least not often is he going to do that kind of thing. He's pretty careful. He's pretty careful with this sort of thing in the books. Is it realistic to say? Is it reasonable to say that what are they going to do? Send up a messenger flock south? If they had spotted them in this camp, would the entire entourage, right, of like 50,000 crows or however many they are, all turn around and fly south to report back to Saruman? Would they send a few of them back? Would they just do their whole sweep and then report the whole thing? What would they do? I mean, I don't know what Saruman would be asking them to do exactly. It doesn't seem to me necessarily all that useful for them to fly back and report. Because flying is gonna be obviously much faster than walking or riding a horse. But you've still got to think it's going to take what? Days? And then what's Saruman going to do about it? So now he knows. So what? Right? What exactly is he going to plan to do? Right? I don't know. They return back with their message, and then he sends some winged servant back. Even then, they're going to be several days' journey away from where they were spotted, right? I don't really know what is likely to be accomplished here. This is why it kind of seems to me more likely that Saruman has sent, if Saruman has indeed sent out the Crabine, that he sent them out with different orders. Search over the whole land, and if you find any halflings, kill them, rip them to pieces, and bring me every shiny thing that they have on them. Right? By the way, that's kind of a very Corvid-oriented command to give, right? I mean, if there are any birds that are capable of following through on that particular set of orders, it would be something in the crow family, wouldn't it? Right? So yeah, if you see halfling creatures, right, peck their eyes out, bring me everything shiny that they have. Right? I mean, if he does seem to have some kind of control over them, they seem to be following his orders. Again, in as much as they are acting very, very unnaturally. He must have, whoever sent them, must have some power to, prompt them, right, to act unnaturally. But I don't think, that it's, I don't think there's any reason to believe that Saruman could telepathically communicate with his Crabine servants if he has them, right? It is possible that if a crow found the ring, then instead of the Dark Lord, we'd have a bird. That is possible. And yes, they do love shiny things. But again, they're under they seem to be under some sort of compulsion to act in the way that they're acting. Could he compel them also to bring back the shiny things? I don't know. I think that's possible. But in any case, I just yeah, I don't know. Mere messengers seem really unlikely, or seem really inefficient in any case, right? So if that's true now, so the hawks, though, again, not the hawks, the crows are equipped to take action independently. There's plenty of them, right? I mean, with as many crows as there are, they could take on as large a company as Rivendell might have wanted to send, right? Yeah. So Madagat, it's not that I don't think it's believable that he would send bird spies out to gain information. It's just harder to see what he hopes to gain exactly from that. Especially since, again, I don't think there's any reason to believe that he's like seeing through the eyes of the birds or whatever. What report is he going to get from birds, and how? Right? Are they going to come back and be like, okay, here's our report for the last 5 weeks, right? We searched over these hundreds of square miles and we saw a whole bunch of things, including, here's the humans that we saw and kind of where vaguely they were. There's probably going to be more than one group of humans, maybe, right? I don't know. I mean, it's a long, big, huge area. Even if there is one of them that can talk, like Roach, Fourth Dauntless, still, what is he going to get? Like, maybe he would get one with enough intelligence, or a group of them with enough intelligence that they could do their own analysis, right, and provide him a sufficiently detailed report that would be useful to him. But I don't know. I mean, all of that does not seem very convincing to me. Again, it just seems like, what is Saruman hoping for, right? What's he gonna do about it? What's Saruman gonna do about it if he finds them? Or if he finds people who might have been them, or if he finds the place where people who might have been them were a week ago, by the time he hears the report. I don't get it, right? I don't understand what he thinks exactly that would accomplish. Can Saruman speak to birds in their own secret tongues like Gandalf is said to be able to do? I don't know. I don't know. Now, yeah, Johannes, I agree that some information is better than no information at all. I agree. But I agree. But I'm just saying, I just come back to the sheer number of crows here, right? This is not the only or the best way to do this. Crabine they don't have a hive mind. Crows don't have a hive mind, right? I mean, they're all splitting up in multiple flocks and spinning around and covering the land. Like, seriously, what's he going to... How many Roax does he have, right? Is there a troop leader in each one who's going to give an individual report, right? Do the crows get together every night when they stop to rest and, pool their information? And I just don't get it, right? That does not seem... I don't see how he's going to get the information. Sure, maybe he can communicate with the birds, but they're still birds. I mean, it doesn't make them super smart birds just because he can speak their secret languages. Even if they do have a Roach who is clearly very smart and indeed substantially wiser than Thorin, though at that particular stage in Thorin's career, that's no great master, you might say, but nevertheless, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it just does. Whereas with that many crows, to to be a little bit more ruthless about it, and say, yeah, kill anybody that you find, bring their shiny stuff back. That seems to me to work, but I don't. So it's conceivable that they could be spirits, not real crows. They could be spiritual crows. That is conceivable. But I rather doubt it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. See, Aspen, that's exactly what I can't see any possible mechanism for. Like, how could he calibrate the Palantir to see through the eyes of the Crabine? And another thing. Why would he need the bloody Crabine if he's got a Palantir? Right? Why would he need it? See, Bjorning, first of all, the text says birds and beasts are his spies. Whose spies? Does it say that about? Saruman? We're told that about Saruman? I don't think we're told that about Saruman, right? The Hawks, I believe. Probably spies. Might be a coincidence. But the Hawks are probably spies. That's how you spy. Can Saruman direct the Palantir without Sauron also seeing? It automatically goes to Sauron. Does Sauron never let him, that is Saruman, use the Palantir for anything else? No, Palantiri don't just see other Palantiri. Some of them are associated with each other, but you can use it. Denethor makes it pretty clear that in his Palantir, he has seen. He doesn't need Gandalf's news about what happened in Rohan because he saw it in the Palantir. He knows what happened, right? Yeah. Okay. I still continue to think a swarm of Crabine this large seems to me like serious overkill for what Saruman is doing. I've been talking about what a huge swath of land these Crabine are searching, right? And that's true. But at the same time, you could just as well say that the area of land they're searching is only a little slice of the entire land that needs to be searched, right? He can't have more than one genocide of crows to distribute. I mean, this is a lot of Crabine, right? If there are this many Crabine searching out multiple areas in like 8 different directions, then, I mean, how could Fangorn and Dunland possibly support that kind of a population of Crabine, right? So yeah, I don't think. It's hard for me to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine that this has to be a huge percentage of the Crabine from Fangorn and Dunland, with the way that this is described, right? Yeah, yeah. Hawks wouldn't attack crows. Hawks don't attack crows. Hawks eat rodents. Falcons attack birds. Hawks don't attack birds generally. They attack. I don't think they're going to attack crows for sure. Anyway, crows are as big as they are. A falcon might try to take a crow, maybe, but I don't. But hawks hunt things that move about on legs. Hawks will eat pigeons. Well, maybe. Especially when in cities where they spend all their time walking around on the ground like the prey of hawks. And chickens for the same reason, Jackie. That is, they hunt things that walk around on the ground. So yes, a bird that is walking around on the ground all the time, like a chicken or a pigeon, may well get attacked by a hawk. But I don't think they're going to catch birds on the wing. Like that. That's not how hawks hunt generally. Falcons do. That's what falcons do. That's what makes falcons different. But the hawks generally hunt things on the ground. Right, crows will mob hawks and eagles. That I can easily imagine, Gilgalady. And the hawks outnumber the crows here substantially. I cannot imagine that one of these thousands and thousands of crows flying around is in any way afraid of howsoever many hawks there are, unless the sky is dark with hawks above them. I don't think they're going to be intimidated. Anyway, okay. You may ask, why am I spending this kind of time on this question? Why am I worrying so much about the Crabine and the hawks when we have so little information? It is one of the things that I find so fascinating about this whole section of this chapter. Throughout their journeys from Holland onwards, we're going to get a number of strange things which the text is not going to explain. It's never going to explain. We're never going to be told. We're never going to find out the answers to these questions. If we don't ask them now, we'll never know, right? And I want to see what kind of things we can put together, right? I'm trying to do a reading that makes most sense, to try to think this through in ways that normally, when reading through the text, I'm too hurried to think it through. Right. But yeah, trying to figure out what the heck is going on in Holland is exactly here. So Bjorning, that's why I'm focusing on this, is that I think there's a lot of Tolkien does an unusual amount of hinting at backstories, right? And I want to try to see if we can figure out or how close we can come to figuring out what Tolkien was thinking was going on at this point. If you think about it, we know almost nothing about what the enemy is actually doing, right? We get the Black Riders have, chased Frodo to the ford. And so we've been in touch with the Black Riders through all of Book One, right? The Black Riders are the embodiment of the evil, searching will of the enemy, right? Closing in on them, chasing them down, stabbing Frodo, all the stuff that they do, right? So we're in continuous touch with what the enemy is up to and how the enemy is acting. But since the beginning of Book Two, we know nothing. And we will carry on knowing nothing until basically the beginning of Book Three, right? The very end of Book Two, maybe, right? When orcs show up again, when they're attacked by orcs. But even then we won't know really until Book Three what the orcs there were up to, where they came from and what they're doing, right? In between, we have little idea. We're told almost nothing. What is Sauron doing? What's he up to? Again, I know in some other, We get some evidence of this kind of stuff from like Appendix B and from Unfinished Tales and elsewhere. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about within this narrative, right? Within this story as Tolkien has written it. Book 2 is this sort of a curtain is drawn in front of the bad guys. And it's a mystery, right? There's the doubt. There's the question. Like we remember we started this chapter by sending out spies, right? The people of Rivendell, Aragorn among them, scouting out the land all around Rivendell to try to figure out what is the enemy doing, what's he planning, what does he know, what conclusions is he drawing, and how might he act as a result of those conclusions, right? Those were the things that we began this chapter being told to ask about, being told to wonder about. And we're not going to get any direct information about that in order to answer those questions ever, right? Or at least not until we can begin to piece some things together from the vantage point of Book 3. So, this is one of the questions I mean to be asking. What can we figure out about that? What do we see? The narrative places us in this really interesting position. And as happens so often, where exactly the narrative places us is in the position of the hobbits. Wide-eyed, along for the ride, wondering what's going on, right? I don't doubt that Gandalf has some shrewd ideas about what Saruman and Sauron both might be up to. I bet you Aragorn has some theories. We're not going to hear them, what those ideas and what those theories are. Instead, here we are as readers, shoulder to shoulder with Sam, right, in this past episode, right, as we will be with Pippin in other episodes, right, with Frodo in some episodes of Book 2 here. And we're left wondering, what is the enemy? Is the enemy going to find us? If the enemy does find us, what is he going to do? Right? What is that going to mean? He's sending out spies. What spies? What is that going to look like? Are there monsters that are going to be chasing us? Do I have to, like, are the very trees spying on us? Right? What is happening? Right? And we don't know. So partly I want to draw attention to how little we know for sure, right? But I think it's fun to look carefully at what we are told and to see if there is any way in which we are being given information that we can put together. Because we've read this story before, right? We are no longer just like the hobbits, right? We have more knowledge than Gandalf does, as was evident from earlier this evening, right? We know, as Gandalf does not, that he is scheduled to plummet to his own doom in 7 days' time, right? Gandalf doesn't know that, but we do. So anyhow, I think that this is why I'm asking these questions. At the very least, I think that we have definitely a genocide of crows and probably hawks who are definitely spying out the land. The minimum conclusion, the safe conclusion that Aragorn feels confident in saying is that Hollin is being watched. This whole area is being watched. He doesn't think they've been spotted yet. They're still okay, but they have to be very careful. That we know for sure. But this is where I cannot help but follow that up with questions about why this way? How is this supposed to work? What is Tolkien himself, perhaps, feeling out, implying about the powers and the plans of the bad guys, of the enemies? One thing that I think, even though you guys aren't many of you aren't willing to go along with me in the idea that the crows have possibly been sent out as a literal murder squad instead of simply as spies. But nevertheless, I think we would all have to agree that the fact that they have been sent out and that the way in which we see them acting really does prove that they are under the control and instructions. Like they are not acting according to their own natures, right? They've not just been told, hey, fly over this region, come back and tell me what you see, right? They are operating with a military precision that is wholly unnatural to crows. And so they are in some sense under the direction or acting under the instructions of some other will that is directing them, that has directed them how to do. Yeah. Yeah, in part, I do want to not theorize ahead of data. In part, I'm wanting to be cautious about it. But I do want to, because I know there's only a limited amount of data. We're never going to get more data about the Crabine. We're done with data. That's why I'm talking about this after this paragraph. Because after this paragraph, we're done with Crabine. We'll never talk about them again. I shall never discuss genocides of crows after this evening for the rest of my life. So I want to think it through. So yeah. But again, it's really limited, right? The data that we get is really limited. That doesn't sound like a true statement. Okay, probably not. Yeah. We do know that Sauron invests his will in orcs, as we can see when they break and run after his defeat. Absolutely. We absolutely do know that. Can Saruman do a similar kind of thing? Yeah, fourth dauntless. We're getting there. I will have similar questions. Indeed, I will have even more pointed questions about the wolves when we get to the wolves. Yeah. So we'll get there. Okay. Let's see. All right. Johanna says, wouldn't they be attacking everyone they find then? Yeah. No, exactly. I think that would be why I would suggest there's so many of them. Yeah, I mean, unless they meet like an army of 10,000 on the march, that many crows. Seriously, you got 10,000 crows? You think 10,000 crows couldn't kill, 10 people in the open? 20 people in the open? 50 people? 100 people in the open? 100 crows per person. I bet you they could take out, 10,000 crows could take out 100 people. Yeah, not 100 archers like movie Legolas. No way, man. 100 archers would not be able to. How many? What percentage of 100 crows flying towards you do you think an archer could take out before they arrived? Right? I don't know. Yeah, Hitchcock certainly thought so. Indeed. Would Saruman use birds? He dismissed Radagast as a mere bird tamer. Dr. Benway, thank you for bringing that up. I've been meaning to mention that. That's one of my favorite things about the idea of this being Saruman, right? That there's a sort of delightful irony here. But I think that there could be more to it, right? Yeah, Dr. Benway, the point would be Radagast, it's not about looking down on birds, exactly. Though, of course, you'll notice how that irony comes in immediately with the bird coming to help Gandalf escape, right? But anyway, Radagast merely tames them, right? Who is Radagast? He's a friend of birds, right? What does Radagast do with birds? Befriends them, right? That's what's lame. It's not dealing with birds at all, which is lame, right? It's merely being buddies with birds that is lame. And that's what Radagast does, right? He makes friends of birds. What use is that? But if you can gather together an entire genocide of crows, assert your will over them, and cause them to perform this action, there you go. That's the way right there, right? That's the that's how it's done, Radagast. This is how the pros roll, right? Yeah, where did the 10,000 figure come from? I'm throwing it out there. I'm guessing, but it's a lot of crows. I mean, they stretch for miles. This flock of crows. So yeah, the description of them, it stretches for miles and miles. I mean, I think there have to be thousands of crows. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, Fourth Dauntless. We know that Saruman has an experimental ring. Perhaps this is a test. I like that idea. It's a medievalist's 10,000. Oh, ouch. I assume that's a medieval historiography joke, Fourth Dauntless. No, if I were a medieval historiographer, I would say that there were 500,000 crows at the very least, right? Possibly several million. Yep. But no, I mean, again, and I also, the number that the other thing I think that inspired my round number of 10,000 is simply like we talked about before when we were discussing this several weeks ago, the sight of the flock of birds, and the size of it moving. Several of us shared stories of seeing enormous flocks of migratory birds that stretch out over miles. I've seen, a cornfield, acres and acres and acres of a cornfield covered with birds, right? Just alive, this black seething mass of birds on the ground as they're resting in their migratory journey. I've seen that many times. Down in Delaware, we used to get that all the time. And I cannot even estimate how many birds were there in those fields, right? I mean, you're talking about dozens of acres of open field, just completely carpeted with birds. And that's the kind of description that we're getting. That's definitely what I feel like I'm being asked to picture when picturing these crows. Even the description of the flock that flies directly overhead. Remember, they're so close together it darkens the sky, right? This is not just like 15 or 20 crows that fly overhead. I mean, in order to make the kind of flock that is described by Sam in the previous passage, you'd need hundreds of birds in that flock to make that dense a flock flying over them. And that's just one little part of the entire, that peeled off from the major thing. So I'm still thinking that 10,000 seems to me to be a fairly conservative estimate of the number of crows that that seem to be described here in this passage. Could they be darkening the sky for troops on the ground we don't see? I have to think Aragorn would have twigged to that at some point, right? Have to think so. Oh, that's interesting. Spielkalb says, in Berlin, I've seen flocks of crows darkening the sky. Yeah, sure. Yes. Right. Might have God, I doubt he counted them. It's hard to do. Hard to do in that instance. But again, it's a lot, is all I'm saying. It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay. All I'm saying is I would not underestimate the strike force capacity of that many crows searching out the land. They are clearly searching out the land. That they are spying is not my question. That all they're going to do is peacefully spy and then rush back to report if they find something is what I slightly doubt. And I at least have some doubt that that is all that this massive genocide of crows would be good for. And I question their internal communication and chain of command and operations here in order to pull that out, in order to pull that off. But anyway, yes. So I do think that there's a risk of them spotting the company. It's more than the risk of them spotting the company. It's the risk of them attacking the company. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Geiger, Saruman has an Air Force. Yeah, Saruman has an Air Force. I mean, yes. And that, by the way, is kind of interesting, actually, don't you think? And actually, doesn't that seem kind of Saruman to you? Right? Like, so remember that Morgoth never had an Air Force. Well, not until the very end, right? His innovation of an Air Force came eventually, but it came very late in the game, right? It's not until the Winged Dragons that Morgoth had any air power whatsoever. And then they got into an air battle and then lost, right? Mad Violinist wants to know, where were the Crabine at the Battle of Helm's Deep? Well, if I were thinking I was going to be afraid of that I was going to be attacked by 10,000 crows, what I would do is get behind a stone wall, basically, right? I would get inside some stone battlements, inside a stone fortress. It would be, that's not the best way to deploy your Crabine Air Force, I think, under those circumstances. Or hide in the Glittering Caves. Exactly. Yeah. It would, these are not, do we know there's no overhead cover, Mad Violinist? I'm not sure we do. I mean, up on the battlements, there's no overhead cover. But yeah, it's also dark. They would not be at their best there. Kind of hard to get the crows and the orcs coordinated in an assault at the same time when the crows work best by day and the orcs definitively do not. Anyway, yeah. Is it any more unnatural than the behavior they're showing now? But it's not about naturalness of behavior. It's about, like, their specs. How good is the night vision of crows? Like, how much would they be capable of doing? Yeah, Trifle says, if Sauron's the one behind the crows, where are they at the Pelennor, frankly? Yes. There we go. Emherd, that's interesting. The first word here, which we ignored, I didn't even talk about that word, so thank you for bringing that up, is that regiments of crows. Regiments are typically 3,000 to 5,000 or so. Aragorn says that regiments are flying, plural, are flying all over the land, so it seems likely that 10,000 might be too few of a guess. Very possible. Very possible. Yeah. So, okay. That's modern, but at the same time, a Roman legion is 4,000. So that's still, I think, within the range that we can see there. So, Yeah, yeah. Anyway, the point is, a regiment is not like, that's a word that conveys more quantity than merely like, he's not just saying there were dozens of crows, right? Or even just saying there were hundreds of crows. He's using a military metaphor, and the military metaphor that he's using is a big one, right? Could be bigger. Like a regiment isn't the largest military grouping, right? But it's not a small one either. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ardent Sauron, I can't imagine that it's not both. Taking regiments to mean they're organized, to speak of their organization, rather than as an estimate of their numbers. I got to think it's both. I mean, again, the military metaphor is apposite. Right? I mean, that's significant here. It is a characterization of how they were operating, of how they were flying as well. But I think it's hard to separate that from the question of numbers as well. Notice he says nothing else in the entire description that conveys anything about how many there were, right? That word regiments is Aragorn's only gesture in his report about, like, did I mention that there was a truly unsettling number of crows? It's not just that there are crabine from Fangorn and there's like a few flocks flying around and we got to watch out for those, right? Like, this was, Hitchcockian levels of creep. That's the only word in which Aragorn points to that, which is a strong emphasis throughout the passage of actual description, is that word regiment. So I think it's definitely, yeah. Price gouging, I hear you. There would be incredible quantities of poo, which, by the way, the corollary to that is they would need lots and lots of food. I'm not even sure if Saruman would need to give them instructions not to rip things to pieces if they found them, right? Yeah. But anyway, back to thanks for coming, price gouging. Good to see you tonight. Glad you could join us. But anyway, yeah, it's back to what I was saying about the Air Force, though. Saruman is all about the innovative, modern thinking, right? When I think about how, frankly, over the top the regiments of crows are, like how much you don't need that just to search the land. Again, the hawks are going to see as much of the land as the regiments of crows are, right? But the crows can do something the hawks can't do, and that's kill things, right? Hawks can kill things too, but squirrels, right? Not humans so much. That's why it has to me the feeling of an innovation, which is another thing that makes me think it's Saruman, right? That Saruman is thinking like, bird spies, we can do better than bird spies, right? He would, in this land, in this area, it would be my guess that Saruman is deploying what has to be his only genocide. I cannot believe that he has multiple genocides of crows at his disposal. I think he's sending it in this part because he suspects that this is the direction that Gandalf is going to come. Saruman has an advantage over Sauron in this whole thing, and that is he knows the people involved better than Sauron does. He knows Saruman, he knows Gandalf, he knows Elrond better than Sauron does, right? And so you got to think that Saruman is down there in Isengard saying, where are they likeliest to go? Lorien. I bet you they're going to take the ring to Lorien, or at least through Lorien, right? So yeah. Yeah, Forthalna says, I like that genocide of crows has now become an actual thing instead of a chat joke. No, I love it. I love it. It's a great way to convey exactly how many crows we're talking about here. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wouldn't he be worried about the Dark Queen? You betcha he is. I think that's why he deployed the genocide of crows, right? He does not want that to happen, right? He does not. I think that Saruman probably has a short list of people in Middle-earth whom he does not want to have the Ring of Power, right? And I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess that Galadriel is the number 2 person on Saruman's personal list, right? Saruman's top 5 list of people he hopes do not end up with the Ring of Power. Sauron's got to be number 1, obviously, because that's game over. But Galadriel, got to be number 2, right? Got to be number 2. Yeah. Dude, is Celeborn on the list? I don't know. No, I don't think Gandalf is number 2. And here's why. Gandalf could have had it. He knows Gandalf found it. But Gandalf didn't have it. Remember when we talked about the scene in Orthanc? He seems to believe that, he seems, to assume that Gandalf would have the ring, right? But Gandalf doesn't have the ring. He's seen that. He's proven that, right? So I think that he's less worried about Gandalf. Not that he's not worried about Gandalf, but I think he's less worried about Gandalf than he's worried about others. Does Saruman know about Aragorn? Probably. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. Probably not. Well, I don't know. I'm waffling. I know that Gandalf is wondering whether he's going to, know that Aragorn was there or whatever. Yeah. But that doesn't prove that he doesn't know he exists. I don't think April Daydream, that's what I'm asking. What reason do we have to think that Aragorn's identity... Now, surely he knows about the Dunedain, right? That a chieftain of the Dunedain... that the line of Isildur is still alive in the north? Surely Saruman knows that, right? He's got to know that. He's got to know that. See, Alarea, I am not convinced that Saruman shares any more information with Sauron than he has to. I think if Saruman didn't ask, he didn't tell. I don't think Saruman is as enslaved as fully as that. I really don't. But we're digressing. We can talk about this more another day. I'm going late here because I am really having fun imagining the genocide of death crows, like the death regiments of crows that that Saruman might have sent out here. It's an interesting line of thought. But anyway, yes, it is late, and I should let folks go. So we're gonna shift to field trip time, and I see I've cunningly neglected even to log in to Lotra, so I should do that now. Hang on a second. I'll make that happen here. But thanks to all of you who are only able to join us for the book discussion part. Sorry I kept you late here this evening. But we'll get things going here as soon as we can. All right. Gotta get things started up properly. All right.
Let's see. I guess I'll just start following people for the raid then.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, man.
Good to be back.
Yes. Oh, man, I'm having an issue.
Oh dear.
Figures, I'm having an issue. That like the one time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you though,
Not
every
my
time
fault.
you say, "Oh,
Not my fault.
God damn it, it was your fault." It is funny every time you guys talk about genocide of crows. Though I just have that bit from the birds in my head, the "Nimblety novelty now now now" song that the children sing.
Right.
Your obligatory creepy children singing music.
Right. Exactly. Man. You know.
Hmm?
Sorry, I'm having an issue. I'm having like a Windows issue.
Oh,
I'm like
dear.
having an issue up the chain from even getting to the point of logging into my Lotro account here this evening.
Oh, several steps removed from login, huh?
Several steps removed from login. Maybe I was accidentally foresighted to go long with the book discussion this evening because I'm not going to be able to get into Lotro. Yeah, thank you, JJ, for recalling the blue screen of death face. That's still one of my favorite stills from my streaming experience right there.
That was my fault, that screen capture.
Yeah, that's a fantastic screen capture right there, Druid's Fire. That was excellent.
Oh, okay. So does it look like a no field trip tonight then?
I think I'm gonna. Sadly, I think I'm gonna have to forego it because I can't get in. Had I thought, and it's ironic because I just like clean forgot to log into Lotro before starting class tonight. So I was, I didn't even think of it. Had I thought of it like I normally do, I would have discovered this before, which probably would have meant I'd have been like 15 minutes later to class than I was.
Probably 20, given the thing I sent you.
Yeah, probably. So, exactly. So yeah, it's. I think I'm gonna have to do no field trip tonight because we have issues that looks like I'm not gonna be able to resolve this immediately. So. Sorry about that, everybody.
No, it can't be helped. That's just how it goes sometimes.
Can't be helped. That's just the way. So we will come back to things. We're almost done with the Yondershire, so maybe next time we'll get to finish the Yondershire, and then after that we can perhaps field trip off to the next segments, the new areas when.
There was a nice lore thing written today about Swanfleet, and there will be one about Cardolan next week.
Cool.
Yeah.
Neat.
Scenario did a tour of Swanfleet on the official last week, and he's doing one on Cardolan this week.
Cool.
On Friday at noon.
Cool. Yeah, looking forward to that stuff.
All right.
Catriona, I can't do Alice tomorrow, unfortunately. I could do this week, but I can't do that tomorrow night. And then I've got Rings of Power stuff, and then Kansas City, and some Rings of Power stuff while in Kansas City. So it'll all be good. Druid's Fire, when does the new area go live?
Expansion launches on November 8th.
November 8th. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Okay.
Then yeah, I think we'll probably actually be done right around that time, actually.
It might be available on Bullroar, but everybody have to set up on Bullroar.
Yeah, that'd be cumbersome.
It's a pain.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Oh man, Almaria, you are so right. There is so much content these days. Yeah. I don't have time for it all, especially considering like, the game content. Like we continue to get awesome new content from Lotro, of course, and there are other Tolkien games like the Gollum game I've really been interested to play and learn more about, but I haven't had time to play it. I saw previews of it, but I haven't had time to play it.
And you're consulting on that, aren't you?
Yeah, no, not the Gollum game, the
one.
Dwarf game.
The
Yeah,
Dwarf game.
Yeah, the Dwarf game. Yeah, the dwarf game for
Gollum
which
game looked really nice.
Yeah, I thought it looked really, really interesting. So
Yeah,
anyway,
not much fighting at all because Gollum's not. He's a sneaker, not a fighter.
exactly. It's fascinating to have
that's my brand.
have a much less much lower content game there. But
I always play a hunter.
yeah, exactly.
Stand in the back and hope they don't find you.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. And Beema, the other game we're talking about, the one I am consulting on is the Return to Moria game, the Khazad-dûm game. It's the Fourth Age Khazad-dûm game. Return to Moria in the Fourth Age to try to finally resettle it for the dwarves after the War of the Ring.
Nice.
Should be. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. I've been involved in story making for that game, and it's been great fun. So anyway, yeah, we may actually do a thing soon. I don't know.
Oh, that would be nice.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, sometime soon, because I think it's due to release in the spring.
Sooner in a relative sense.
If they let us, if they give you permission to stream it, heck yeah, we can do that.
That would be fun, yeah. So I'm working on that kind of thing. So we'll see what we can do. But anyway, yeah, man, I'm in Moto. I wish I had a time turner. But Lindoneer, looking forward to seeing you at Middlemoot. That'll be fun. Can't wait to get there this weekend. Going to be fun this Saturday, and we'll be. I'll be Kansas City this weekend, and well, I'm usually here in New Hampshire over the weekend, so that isn't saying much for the weekend after that. But
I'll be in New Hampshire.
There you go. You'll be in New Hampshire too, so that'll be good.
Someday.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyway, thanks everybody. Sorry for the anticlimax at the end of the show here tonight, but we'll do what we can. I'll get things up in order so that next time we can have our normal field trip and finish up in Yondershire. Awesome. Thanks everybody. Have a good night now.
Bye.